listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you, and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We're less than 3 weeks away from the federal election, and the latest Newspoll out today shows we are heading for a Labor minority government. And if that happens, our guest this afternoon will play a key role in governing our country. Greens Leader Adam Bandt released some of his key policies today, including making university and TAFE free for all students and how he plans to fix our housing crisis. But how will the Greens pay for these big spending promises? Speculation is rife there could be a massive crackdown on negative gearing. And could your family home and inheritance now be hit with brutal new taxes? Adam Bandt joins us for this special election edition of the afternoon briefing. Mr. Bandt, welcome back to the briefing. Thanks for joining us. Now, you must be really happy today. Latest polling shows that Labor is in front to form a minority government next month, putting you, of course, in a key seat at the negotiation table. Of course, we know sometimes polls aren't always right, but how are you feeling?
But look, the experts have been saying this for a while, that we're headed towards a minority parliament. So neither Labor or Liberal have enough numbers themselves to form government, and they need to come and talk to people on the crossbench. And we've said really clearly in that situation that we will keep Peter Dutton out. We don't want Peter Dutton to be Prime Minister. But we'll get Labor to act on a number of key things in that minority parliament. Last time we were in that situation, we got dental into Medicare for kids and we got climate legislation. Now we want to get dental into Medicare for everyone. We want to make it so you can see the GP for free, go back to having free education in this country and fund it by taxing the big corporations and the billionaires. So we think this is actually a really exciting opportunity. It feels like it's a once-in-a-generation chance now to actually get some real action on some of these big issues confronting Australia.
When the Prime Minister was asked about whether he'd be willing to negotiate with the Greens, he seemed to be quite hesitant about giving any detail. How did you feel about that response?
Well, look, during the course of this parliament, we have negotiated together. We got some really good outcomes. We got $3.5 billion for public and community housing as a result of Greens pressure. We got people the right to disconnect. That was a Greens initiative, so that when you finish work, you can turn off the phone or the email unless you're getting paid for it. They're things that we've, through our pressure, negotiated. And I think I'd be astounded if any politician, let alone the Prime Minister, refused to accept the parliament the Australian people chose. And we're in this really interesting situation at the moment where less than a third of the country votes for the government, a bit more than a third votes for the opposition, and about a third is voting for someone else. And we're seeing that trend continue, and people are saying we want more voices in parliament. We want some of these issues that aren't getting addressed put on the table, like the housing and rental crisis. And I think the flip side of that is that it puts an obligation on us when we're there to work together to get outcomes for people. And so I am quite excited about what might happen over the coming weeks.
In regards to how people are voting right now, Mr. Bandt, I find it very interesting that I feel the general consensus with voters and Australians is they're disillusioned with the majority of politicians. They feel they're doing it tougher than ever financially, they're working harder, and the general consensus may be these are just sugar hits, they're buying votes, and nothing is really going to change for them.
But I think that's an accurate analysis of what Labor and the coalition are doing. Just look at what they've done with housing over the weekend. It's the battle of the Band-Aids at the moment between Labor and Liberal, and these short-term answers that maybe a few $100s here, maybe it's for a year, maybe it disappears after a year. And meanwhile, the big problems that are underlying it don't get addressed. And it's putting housing out of reach of Gen Zs and millennials, who are the biggest voting bloc at this election. But Labor and Liberal are not addressing it. And I think people are realising we can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result. And that's why more and more people are saying, including in that poll today that you referred to, are saying for people under 34, the majority are saying we actually want a minority parliament where some of these issues can start to get addressed. And people are right to look at government and see them tinkering around the edges. Let's just take housing as an example. Back in the 80s, the average house cost 3 times the average income. Now it's 8. right? And 8 times the average income. And rents have gone up 35% in this parliament alone. Like people's wages haven't gone up 35%, but rents are going up. And then you've got HECS student debt on top of that as well. And so people are saying, I'm doing all the right things, all the things that have been asked of me, and I still can't make ends meet. They're looking to government to fix it, and government's just tinkering around the edges. And that's why, I think, as he said, a lot of people are saying, well, this time I want the Greens, I want a third option because we can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result.
So, Mr. Bandt, let's talk about your solutions, because I think what we need to really concentrate on at the moment is key policies, structural change that are going to fix these really serious problems that have been neglected by both sides of government and politicians for decades. Let's talk about housing. So what's your proposal to fix our housing crisis?
So really three things that we need to do. One is we need to address these billions in handouts that are going to wealthy property investors who've already got multiple homes to go and buy their fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. $176 billion in handouts going on that. What that does is that it helps the wealthy property investor who's got 5 homes to go and buy their 6, but they bid up the price of the property out of reach of a first home buyer because the property investor has got a big fat check from Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton that they can put in their pocket, whereas the first home buyer doesn't. And I just think it's wrong that the government gives more financial support to someone who's got 5 homes to go and buy their 6th than they do for someone to get their first. These tax breaks were introduced by John Howard back in 1999, and that is behind the turbocharging of house prices that we're seeing in this country. We're saying let's grandfather it for people who've got one property because they might have what are often called mum and dad investors who might be setting themselves up for their retirement. But if you want to own more than 2 properties, okay, good luck to you, but don't expect a government check to go and buy your 5th, 6th, 7th property. So that's point one. Let's rein in those
So you're
tax
talking
handouts.
about capital gains tax there.
And negative gearing, that's
Okay.
right. And our point is that current generations looking to buy a home should have the same chance of home ownership as previous generations have had. Point 2 is government's got to get back into the business of building homes that people can actually afford. We used to do this in this country, and so we're pushing for a public property developer that would build homes that you could rent for 25% of your income or go and buy at close to cost price. And the independent analysis shows that would save a first home buyer about $250,000 off the price of a home. Third thing is we need to cap rent increases. Like housing is an essential. It should be a human right. We regulate the cost of other essential services like power. There should be a limit on how much rents can go up by because at the moment, got people around the country in rentals where there's mould in the walls and doors that don't lock and windows that are broken, and the landlord can still put up the rent by however much they like, with one exception of the ACT, where there's been Greens in there and there's a limit. We want to see that across the country. Do those 3 things and we start to tackle the housing crisis seriously. Like enough of the Band-Aids, enough of the Band-Aids.
I spoke to actually a political analyst today, and he said, much along the same lines as you had mentioned with the parties neglecting the big issues, a lot of Band-Aids. He said we need to cut immigration in this country. That is a key issue, he alleged or argued, behind the housing crisis. Is that something you'd like to cut?
No, I don't agree with blaming migrants for a problem that they didn't cause. If migration was the issue, then why didn't house prices tumble during COVID when we had no migration into this country? Like, this is a problem that has been decades in the making. Former Liberal Prime Minister John Howard started it by turning on the tap for the wealthy property investors and pushing first home buyers and renters out. We know what the issues are. Let's build more public housing. Let's build homes people can afford, and let's stop giving massive amount of handouts to wealthy property investors. I'm not going to join in the Peter Dutton, Donald Trump style politics of blaming migrants for a problem that they didn't cause.
There are so many questions I'd love to ask about this because we're all on the same page. There is a housing crisis. You talk about regulating, housing the same as power. One may argue this is going to cost billions and billions of dollars. How are you going to pay for it? I know one proposal you've put forward is the inheritance tax. So can you rule out under any circumstances that you will not introduce a death tax and you will not tax the family home?
Yes, I can rule that out. Like, that's not something that we're proposing. Our opponents might say, but it's not something we're taking. We're saying really simply, we need to tax big corporations and billionaires to fund these promises. Like, at the moment, if you're listening to this and you pay tax on your job, you may have paid more tax than a multinational does in any given year. Like, one in three.
Why is that?
Well, 1 in 3 big corporations in this country pays no tax at all at the moment.
Why?
$0. Because they make donations to Labor and Liberal. Labor and Liberal then write the tax laws in a way that suits those big corporations. They can employ lobbyists to come and patrol the corridors of Parliament, right? And they make these donations to Labor and Liberal and they get them to write laws that suit them. The Greens don't take those corporate donations, right, from the big corporations. We don't take them. So we go and fight for the community. At the moment, we've got these big gas corporations, for example, that are bringing in billions of dollars of revenue. ExxonMobil, people would know that name, brought in $15 billion in revenue in 1 year and paid $0 tax. So we think when a nurse pays more tax than a multinational, something's wrong. So we've got a plan to make these big corporations pay tax on their excessive profits. Billionaires in this country, over the last 6 years, they doubled their wealth. Like, I bet most people didn't double their wealth during COVID and during everything else that's happened. But billionaires did. And see, they're making these billions of dollars out of putting up the prices. And we can see in the US what happens when you let these billionaires and big corporations have massive, massive power and get away with things unchecked. We're saying make them pay their fair share of tax by making big corporations pay tax just on their excessive profits. So when they're making these huge profits, in the way that some other countries tax them, it's the Parliamentary Budget Office, the independent body, has said $514 billion can be raised. Right? That helps fund things like putting a roof over everyone's head, making it free to see the GP, making it free to have a good education in this country, just like the Prime Minister had, so you don't end up with a massive debt sentence. By making the big corporations and billionaires pay their fair share of tax, we can, in this wealthy country of ours, make sure that everyone can afford the basics.
Just getting back to my original question about inheritance tax, death duties. Some of us are too young to remember what they are. I'm old enough to remember lots of people talking about them. So it's a massive area that has been speculated that various politicians are going to go for. So can you 100% rule out the family home is not going to be taxed?
Yes, I can. And we've outlined all of that is not on the table for us, because what we've outlined is a plan to tax the billionaires and big corporations, to stop the handouts to the wealthy property investors that are denying first home buyers the chance to get in and have a roof over their head, and wind back things like fossil fuel subsidies.
And also an inheritance tax. Now, that can all be put into one big group, because I think a lot of Australians right now, if their parents or grandparents have worked hard, the only way they can get into the property market is, awful to say, but if their parents do pass away and they have some type of ownership over the sale of that property. And if they lose that, they even need that money to put their loved one into a nursing home now. So I know I keep asking no inheritance tax, and the family home is off limits.
That's right. Right. That's our position. And what we're trying to shine a light on is, I guess, the growing gap between the billionaires and the big corporations and everyday people in this country, the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. Like, we don't want Australia going down the US-style road of inequality.
So in regards to your other key policies, can we talk about Medicare? Now, I thought an excellent question from a person from the audience during the first election debate with the leaders was the Prime Minister brought out his Medicare card. We've seen a lot of gimmicks. And then Mr. Dutton said to a person in the audience, okay, when you take your Medicare card, do you also have to take your credit card? Because as we all know, Medicare isn't free at GPs anymore. Mm-hmm. So many GPs can't bulk bill. Now, what you want to put on the Medicare scenario is free dental. How important is that? Because I know so many people that cannot afford to get basic dental done because they can't afford to pay for it.
The main reason that people put off going to the dentist is cost. And the problem with that is that you put it off because of cost, and then it actually can cause problems later on that then become more harmful for you and more expensive to fix. And we've heard stories of emergency doctors saying, I've had people fronting up with a mouth problem, an abscess or something, that if it had been treated 6 months ago, they'd have been fine, and now they're having to front up to emergency. And so for us, like we in the last minority parliament in 2010, the Greens got dental into Medicare for kids. And as a result, if you're under 18, you can get Medicare treatment at the dentist, and 3.4 million families and kids have done that. And it's a really significant thing. Now we want to get dental into Medicare for everyone. And we also want to make it free to see the GP. We've been arguing for this since last October, where we released a costed policy to make it free to see the GP again in this country. And a few weeks ago, Labor adopted part of it. Like, great. We feel Greens pressure works.
One of your key election promises or policies you announced today was the free education. Anyone that knows anyone that's going to university, it's actually become so expensive to go to university. It's actually out of financial reach for a majority of young students. They then finish their university degree. Are they trying to save to get an apartment? But then they've got this massive HECS debt. How are you going to pay for that though?
Again, costed policies funded by making billionaires and big corporations pay their fair share of tax. We've had free education in this country before. Like, it used to be free to go and see the GP. Like, we can do these things again. The pressures are coming because they're letting the big corporations and billionaires make billions in profits and not pay tax on it. And so if we start to fix that, we can do things like free education. I didn't get free education.
Neither did I.
And so, but this is just a sign of how quickly these things have changed. Right? So the Prime Minister got free education, right? It's denying it for everyone else, but the Prime Minister got free education. I did an arts law degree, and at the end of it, I had a HECS debt of $12,000. I was speaking to someone today who's doing exactly the same degree as I did, who hasn't finished yet, and he's telling me his debt's already $60,000. It's going to be close to $90,000 by the time the ends. Now, then you add on top of that the fact that you can't find a place to rent near where your job is afterwards, and then you look at the house prices that, as I say, used to be 3 times the average income, now 8 times the average income. I am really worried that we are becoming that society where you do all the things that are asked of you and it is still impossible to get ahead. Now, we should not be that society. In a wealthy country like ours, everyone should be able to afford the basics. And this, I think, part of our frustration this term of Parliament, it feels like we've been trying to grab the government by the shoulders and shake them and say, like, it's actually much more urgent than you seem to think it is. Like, people are skipping meals to pay the rent. Like, people are living in substandard accommodation. Like, we hear from single parents who are saying, I'm not going to buy myself a meal this week or go and see the doctor myself so I can buy shoes for the kids. Like, people are really struggling. And then meanwhile, you get price gouged at the supermarkets. I'm trying to say this is actually really urgent. Like, if we don't fix it now, and yes, it may be that we have to look at maybe not giving someone who's got 5 homes a tax handout to go and buy their 6. Like, maybe that's where we need to find the savings.
Can I ask you a quick question? We've seen, and I'm saying both sides of government over decades, we've seen, for example, if there's an aged care crisis, we have 2 or 3 royal commissions, millions of dollars spent trying to fix it up. Recommendations are handed down, nothing's ever adopted, nothing changes. Even with the supermarket situation, 3 years under the Labor government, under Mr Albanese, one of his election promises was, I'll crack down on the supermarkets. Now, the general consensus is, both Labor and Liberal, you've had how many years to fix this problem, and you expect us to believe that you are going to fix it?
Yeah, look, we can't keep voting for the same 2 parties and expecting a different result. And I think people would be entitled to say, well, show us what you've done for the last 3 years. It's like, well, rent's gone up 35%. Cheese has gone up close to 20%. I'm getting price gouged. The supermarkets still seem to rake in over $1 billion of profit in the last full financial year. Like, what's going on? And I think this is part of the reason I think that people disconnect from politics and are saying, well, I'm watching you, government. I'm in strife. I'm putting food back when I get to the checkout because I can't afford the groceries. I'm struggling with rent and mortgage. And what have you done? Like, what are you actually doing? And not only does that put people further into crisis, I think in the long term it allows the likes of Trump and so on to come along and say, oh, well, you see, governments aren't looking after you, but, trust me, I'll go and blame the migrants or I'll blame the queer community and cause the chaos. And so we really think that government can actually do good things for people, right? And that is, I guess, the key plank of our election campaign is that governments can address the big problems in people's lives. We haven't seen governments really do that over the last few years, but instead of, I guess, feeling hopeless, we're actually saying there's a pathway to actually make it different. And okay.
Talking about the election, ABC election analyst Anthony Green has said that Labor holds 3 seats with a margin below 5% where the Greens have a chance, but the Greens also hold seats on slim margins that Labor or another candidate could win. Final question, how are you feeling about this election?
I'm feeling really good. I'm feeling really, really good. We know Labor, Liberal, the billionaire group Advance, like they're coming after us. We understand. We get that, this election, and we take nothing for granted. But we really believe in what we're pushing for. Like, if you would distill it, I'd say in a wealthy country like ours, everyone should be able to afford the basics. Like, we should be able to look after each other as in this country. That shouldn't be a controversial proposition, that everyone should have a roof over their head and be able to get the healthcare and the education that they need. And you shouldn't go your whole life worried about how you're going to pay your rent or your mortgage or pay your student debt. That's the kind of country we've had before. And when we tell people what we're pushing for and how achievable it is and how close we are this election, I've spent a long time door knocking, like people's eyes light up. It's like, okay, I've actually got a chance to do something. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Let's vote for change this time. So take nothing for granted. I'm off to some of those seats over the coming days. We know that there are others who are throwing a lot at it, but we think we've got the right plan.
Wishing you all the best for the election. Thanks you, Adam. And that was Greens leader Adam Bandt. And that's it for this special election episode of the Afternoon Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us so you don't miss our episodes or deep dive of the day. You can follow us on our socials, on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and also on TikTok and YouTube. You just need to search Listener Newsroom. That is spelled LISTNR. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company. See you then.